Welcome to Extra Take. Today we're going to investigate two things: behavioral addiction and a preview on what makes tech so addicting. Nicotine, alcohol, and hard drugs are what pop into mind most of the time when we say addiction, but behavior can be addicting too. Remember, addiction is a subversive experience. A whole routine builds up around the activity in whatever addicts the person. Contrary to common sense, levels of dopamine in the brain actually spike before a smoker lights their cigarette. Nicotine serves as a signal to end the euphoria, not to initiate it. Tension and anxiety go hand in hand with engaging in addiction. In the case of the cigarette, smoking relieves that anxiety, so once you begin, there's no more reward to get. But addictive behaviors continue when somebody doesn't know what else to do. It is possible to be distracted away from your addiction. We don't need them, we just depend on them. Again, remember how Vietnam vets quit heroin cold turkey because they had better things to finally do. Cleopatra the monkey was addicted to her lever, but only when she was put in the cage she learned to associate it with. Let's define a few things. Addictions, obsessions, and compulsions are not necessarily the same thing, although compulsion may be part of an addiction. Specifically, obsessions are thoughts that a person cannot stop having, and compulsions are behaviors that a person cannot stop engaging in. Obsessions and compulsions are deeply unpleasant not to pursue. Satisfying an obsession or compulsion is negative reinforcement. You are subtracting an unwanted consequence. Meanwhile, addictions promise an immediate reward, which is positive reinforcement, the addition of a desired reward. Behavioral addictions are unique in that they aren't triggered by or relieved by a substance. Behavioral addiction is defined as a form of addictions involving a compulsion to engage in rewarding, non-substance related behavior, but with the effect of negative consequences to a person's physical or mental well-being. Perhaps you've heard the term impulse control disorders, which is another way of describing behavioral addictions. And these include gambling, food, sex, pornography, using computers, video games, cell phones, online shopping, and even exercise. Some people exercise their way into injury and continue exercising before their bodies heal, constantly making the problem worse. Looking at that short list of behavioral addictions, you should probably recognize that these are pretty widespread in our population, and they seem to be a product of technology. I'm very much against the tendency to view the past as a golden age when things were better. But what could people have been behaviorally addicted to in the 1800s? I'm not at all in favor of banning technology or aspects of technology. We just need to learn how to use it responsibly. Now, it's tricky on how to approach behavioral addiction. If we just admit that we all have behavioral addictions, then we run the risk of accepting it as human nature. Saying this is just the way things are now is not the same as saying that things are better. Some countries view behavioral addiction as a social issue, and I think this is the most helpful attitude to have. We have failed ourselves, and especially young people, on how to act responsibly. We are all too ready to let a diagnosis serve as the explanation for something, and then be completely relieved that we finally have an answer, but then not be willing to do anything appropriate about it. I see this all over the place. My child is only happy when she's watching Disney movies, so all day long I let her watch Disney movies. If we take the Xbox away, he just screams, so we just let him play all day. What you're doing is rewarding bad behavior and giving up. And the medications. I would bet a decent chunk of money that the number of children who are on ADHD medication that don't need it is greater than the number who do need it. ADHD diagnoses keep increasing, which is ridiculous because children today are the same neurologically as they were 50 or 100 years ago. Only the environment has changed. You aren't born with ADHD, just a propensity to it. Despite the best efforts of many good parents, ADHD is going to be a reality for some people. But again, the fact that it keeps increasing is a signal that we are failing at some level. Not that children are somehow different now, or that there was all kinds of ADHD in the past that we just didn't diagnose. It's not caused by pollution or exposure to radiation. It's caused in large part by distracted, low attention span parents breeding distracted, low attention span children. Basically, what I'm saying is stop using chemicals and the internet to babysit your children. That's your job. If I may be a little bit more fair, there's another very natural error that we adults are making. Overall, we have a better sense of right and wrong than young people. And because we act this out, lead by example, we tend to be utterly shocked when the children just don't get it. But leading by example is not the same as teaching something. There are no unwritten rules. We learn lessons and truths either by suffering the consequences of failure, which is undesirable, or by being taught those lessons and truths. We don't teach children how to behave. We punish their behavior and tell them what not to do in a reactionary way. We don't teach children how to use technology. We take it away from them when they are grounded, which makes it worse because you are reinforcing the fact that it is their fallback. It's time to be more proactive because for huge numbers of people, it's already too late. Studies cited in the book Irresistible, this whole thing was inspired by, find that 41% of the respondents across 4 countries suffered at least one behavioral addiction in the last 12 months. At some point, we should expect almost every single person to suffer at least one behavioral addiction by their mid-20s. In 2008, adults were spending 18 minutes a day on their cell phones. It's now 3 hours, and it's not for the better. Here's why. This graph shows how much time I spend in a typical week on various activities. I'm pretty lucky to have all this free time. I'm 28 years old, and I'm single, and I don't have a family. Give me a second. Why? What you see on top is how many total hours a week are devoted to each thing, and the chart shows that as a percentage. This assumes 112 hours a week. I've subtracted 56 hours for sleep. My cell phone time is too high at 1.5 hours a day, but let's say I spend 3 hours like the average adult. That time has to be subtracted from my leisure time, and look at the consequences. I just went from having around 1/3 of my week for whatever I want to do to 1/4, and with no reward. There is no reward for being on your phone, except for satisfying your compulsion. I asked one of my classes to look up their screen time. One student averaged 7 hours a day. That would completely take away my leisure time, and then the only thing that's left is to lose time elsewhere. And this does happen. Adults get less done at work because they stop whatever they're doing to look at their phones constantly. Cell phones and school are the worst, the absolute worst. From what I see on a daily basis, having your phone with you at school is the equivalent of only coming to school 50% of the time in an era before cell phones. Students are so distracted that they are at best 50% engaged in learning, working, socializing, and just getting anything done. If you can't tell, I'm really annoyed by the fact that we are holding our children back. Let's go back to this graph. If I increase my cell phone time, I don't really have 27.5 hours to do whatever I want. I haven't included cleaning my house, making my bed, doing laundry, fixing broken stuff, exercising, or any of the stuff that I need to do to keep my life in order. What's going to happen is these things are going to disappear. What am I going to lose? Is 2 hours of Facebook a day worth having to live in a house that is never clean? Is gaining 20 pounds worth all the time streaming TV shows instead of going to the gym? Those sound like no-brainers, but how many people do you know don't have what they want in life because they hold themselves back? What are you holding yourself back from? Technology doesn't have to be bad. It's a huge reason why the world has become better. But we have to learn how to use it and what its effects are. Cocaine was invented as medicine, and it looked like a miracle at first. Sigmund Freud wrote an essay on the wonderful healing powers of cocaine, but he became progressively more and more addicted to it. John Pemberton invented a drink containing cocaine, Coca-Cola, to wean himself off of morphine addiction he developed after being injured in the Civil War. But Coca-Cola caused Pemberton to die penniless. All he did was transfer his addiction to something else. The smartphone is a miracle, and we all use them in ways that make our lives better. They're here to stay, but we have to learn how to use them and the internet and everything else to improve our lives overall, rather than improving some aspects while losing many other aspects entirely. Next time, we will investigate how to engineer a behaviorally addicting experience and uncover exactly how tech is intelligently designed to be as addicting as possible. Thanks for watching.